The big beautiful bill might not be so pretty after all, at least when it comes to the US population size. The Congressional Budget Office found Wednesday that the United States population will likely decrease by hundreds of thousands of people by 2035, thanks to the Republicans' One Big Beautiful Bill Act. The CBO's forecast is attributable mostly to new laws under the BBB that enforce President Trump's immigration crackdown. CBO projects that 290,000 immigrants will be removed from the US from 2026 through 2029.
The nonpartisan agency expects there will be 320,000 fewer people in the country. The non-institutionalized population is set to shrink too. But the CBO did caution, however, that its findings depend on factors including judicial rulings and detention capacity, which aren't set in stone.
Still, the projection has some people concerned. A senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, Jessica Riddell, posted, quote, CBO projects the population to barely grow over 30 years and decline outside of immigration. The under 65 population will begin declining next year. We can't sustain 3% economic growth or pay for Social Security and Medicare without healthy workforce growth. This will get ugly. The Cato Institute's David Beer posted, quote, CBO says we are 5 years away from population decline, if not for immigration. The fact that 3.5 of those will be spent exacerbating the problem is shocking. What do you think of this, Amber?
Yeah, we got the libertarian perspective there.
Yes,
I'm obviously a lot less doomer than they are.
Sure.
Look, I think if we're looking in short term, one of the issues we have right now is that we don't have enough jobs for the number of laborers that we have. That was a report that came out last week. So in that sense, actually reducing the immigrant population gives American workers more of a fighting chance to get some of those jobs, which I think is incredibly useful and exactly in line with what Trump ran on in terms of trying to be the working class president. I also think that the priority should not be on importing new people, but on encouraging Americans to have more children. We obviously have a major problem in terms of people getting married much later in life, not valuing having children as highly as they used to. And so having a child-centric policy, a family-centric policy at the national level that encourages people to have family creation and family formation, I think should be our priority.
So I feel like today, Amber, we're having a lot of unexpected agreements in a way. People who have tuned in hoping for some massive fight might be disappointed. It's interesting, I think, when immigration comes up with you and I, one of our, I think, points of agreement is the fear of unregulated illegal immigration, lowering the standards for American workers, whether it's in terms of pay or labor conditions or anything else.
That's right.
Now, there are obviously areas of immigration that we disagree on as well, and we've had those debates before. But to link this to something else that came out, there have been the couple of months of disappointing jobs growth, purportedly disappointing. Now, they are low numbers, I'm not arguing with that, but it is notable that the unemployment rate has not increased very much at all despite those low numbers. And therefore, people have argued, well, the reason for the low numbers is because whether people who are here without authorization have left of their own volition or been deported, it has sort of reduced the total number of people seeking work. And I'm not sure that's a massive problem necessarily. I mean, the purpose of a national economy is to provide the greatest level of employment to the people legitimately within that economy, right? So I'm just not sure whether some of the criticisms there that are coming from, I would say, liberal or pro, well, sometimes honestly pro unauthorized immigration perspective are really justified. Now, to your point about having children and all of that, there is, as you're kind of implicitly acknowledging, a whole other actuarial argument about the fact that Social Security, for example, is set to be the dynamics or the equation behind it is set to change because the number of working people relative to the number of beneficiaries is declining and declining and declining, and that risks the solvency of that program. That obviously, I think, is something to be concerned about. I suppose it could be handled perhaps by Americans and people who are here legally having more children.
Right, and I mean, outside of just the economics of it, what are we going to do if we have a massive elderly population with no kids to physically take care of them, or even healthcare workers to physically take care of them? Right, there was always this tradition that the kids would take care of the parents as they got older, and with fewer kids, a lot of people are going to be in facilities with no family around to be with them in the final years of their life, which I find incredibly sad, and I imagine is quite unfulfilling and dissatisfying for the people who are having to live through that. One other point on the workforce numbers, talking about unemployment and the rate staying the same, there's also been a lot of native-born Americans who have left the workforce and are no longer looking for work because they've really become frustrated. This accelerated, of course, during the pandemic, but if you look at the numbers from the 70s and 80s in terms of the labor participation rate compared to now, obviously we're in a different time, but they have, the labor participation rate has declined from something like 75% of, able-bodied young men to something much lower, about 50 or 60%. And so when people talk about potential labor shortages of getting rid of illegal immigrants, I always want to counter with, well, we have a massive disaffected group of able-bodied working-age men who are not in the labor force anymore because they've basically given up looking for work for one reason or another. And I think that work gives people dignity and purpose. Fulfilling work can really positively impact a human's life. And so providing them those opportunities and getting more of those people actively working again, I think would lead to a much healthier society.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're on the brink of getting into one of our broader cultural discussions about why those
That's right.
younger men are so disaffected or so disconnected that they have kind of dropped out of the workforce. But just to pick up on another point that you mentioned, anecdotal evidence, of course, but I was kind of sad. Just this week, I live in an apartment building, and my across the hallway neighbour, who is a woman, I would certainly in her 80s, she just moved out this week, and I'm not going to name her, but she moved into an assisted living facility, and I said, "Oh, sad to see you go," and she said, "Yeah, well, I've no children, and it's." I mean, she didn't tell me what age she is, but she said she's been having some difficulties, and I asked her how long she had lived in our building, and she's lived there 50 years.
Wow.
Which is kind of amazing, and I'm sad to see her go. Now, she seems, from to the extent that I know her morale and everything is good, and she's certainly mentally sharp, but it is that sadness where, I wish she had a better option. I'm sure it's a good facility and all of that, but it's a slightly melancholy thing. I think,
it's interesting you bring that up. I actually have a similar situation where I have a neighbor in my townhome community who does have children, but they're not there very frequently, and the conditions that she's living in are very, very difficult, and I don't think she's really fully able to take care of herself. And even though she has kids, obviously. They're not really doing it the way that I would do it, which, it's difficult when you have a parent who's going through difficult times. But yes, it's very hard to watch, very hard to watch.
For sure. Well, anyway, we could go on and segue through lots of things, but I guess
we'll keep talking about our neighbours.
Exactly. We have a lot more to talk about on Rising, not our neighbours this time, but stay with us.